I'd like to share a few thoughts and stories about Dadi Prakashmani ji. It was my great fortune to have known her for a very long time, all the years from 1968 onwards. I had seen her earlier also when I wasn't yet fully following the system of Raj Yoga, but that was teenage years, and so just love, and that was it. But of course I saw her through the years take on the role of leadership and also an amazing skill in dealing with people and handling situations. You've been hearing a lot about all those stories of Dadi's administration skills, her intuitive skills, her people skills. But I'd just like to share a few personal stories. In 1968, in the month of May, there was an exhibition that was being organized by Mumbai and Pune together in a place called Mahabaleshwar, because Brahma Baba at that point was still around in the physical form, and he had suggested that there should be places in all these summer resorts, these hill resorts around in different places in India, and whichever center was in that state would take responsibility. And so Ramesh Bhai, together with Dadi Prakashmani, had decided that there would be a program in Mahabaleshwar, a beautiful hill resort, a mountainous district further away in the state from Pune. And so Dadi Jayanti was in Pune and Dadi Prakashmani in Mumbai, and so they both collaborated to make this happen. And what had happened was that it was summer holidays in India, and there were a lot of tourists coming to these places, tourists from India basically, and it would be an opportunity to serve people when they were free, when they didn't have work commitments, etc. And Dadi Jayanti suggested to my mother and myself. My mother had been following Raj Yoga since years 1957, and myself just a few weeks. But Dadi asked us to go to Mahabaleshwar and help out at the exhibition. And the Bombay group was there already, and they'd set up residence for about 40 people in one of the boarding schools there. It's a place where there's many boarding schools, and so they were shut for the summer. And so we had our own arrangements for cooking, etc., etc. And Dadi Prakashmani headed up that delegation. And arriving there, it was very beautiful to meet Dadiji. But also next morning, we have meditation at 4 o'clock in the morning, and Dadi sat in front on the grass, on the lawns, conducting meditation. And the moon was still shining brightly. Dadi's hair was already silver. And so literally she looked like a goddess conducting that meditation at 4 o'clock. And again, she conducted the morning class, the Murali that we have each day. And so a small group of us and Dadi conducting class, it was very beautiful. And then we would all have breakfast together. Another sister who is now serving in San Francisco, Sister Chandru, was also there. And I was just 19 and Chandraben about the same. And Dadi noticed that we were the youngest around there. And so what she did was to invite us to walk with her to the exhibition which was taking place in town. This boarding school was a little out of town, just about 25 minutes walk, and we would walk there. But sometimes what Dadi would do, she would hold our hands, myself and Chandraben, one in each hand, and she would run down the hill. Dadi must have been in her 40s at that time, when we were less than 20, both of us. But Dadi would hold our hand and run down the hill with us. And it was like she was a young girl on holiday. And of course, then at the exhibition, which was taking place at the town hall, she would become very occupied in meeting all the visitors and so on. But on the way back home, again, she would look for us and call us, and she would again walk up the mountain, up the hill with us. And so it was a time for her to share her personal stories, her perception of how things had happened through the day, and to give us training. She was basically mentoring us on how to manage questions and the questions that people ask. And I just saw it as love and friendship at that time. But of course, later I realized that it was a very conscious thing she was doing in training us. My next very important memory of Dadiji is when I was asked by the organization to come back to my home in London to my parents. This was by then June 1969, and she encouraged me to go back in the spirit of service, to be able to serve there. And after coming back to London, and London was a dry desert at that point, yoga just meant physical exercises. Raj Yoga had never been understood or heard of. And so people were only just beginning to hear the word meditation. So it was really like a desert. And I had only been following the teachings for about a year by then. And so I wasn't experienced enough to deal with people's questions and so on. So there wasn't much happening in terms of serving people. And so a few months later in August, I wrote to Dadiji, and she'd said I could write to her in English because she could read and write English, but speaking was not so much her forte, but she could understand. And so I wrote to her saying, Dadi, really, there's no service here. Can I come back? There's so much service in India. And Dadi's letter back to me was very beautiful. And in that, basically, she wrote, there's always service of the self to be done. And it was a turning point in my time in London. And I took that on board seriously and started a program of yoga for myself in the morning, in the evening. And of course, my mother was with me, so that was a great help. But my personal yoga timetable became very powerful. And it was a preparation for me for times when things would get very hectic and busy later on. But it was Dadi's letter that persuaded me to continue staying in London. Another turning point was, by now, lots of centers had started abroad. Dadi Jayanti had been the instrument to train teachers, so service was really spread out all across the world. Already, I think, in 1986, we must have been in about 60 countries across the globe. And an idea had come to celebrate the International Year of Peace dedicated to the UN. This was 1986. And a title came from Australia, 1,000,000 Minutes of Peace. And then a group in London, working with the team in New York at the UN, worked together to create a program. And it was called, finally, 1,000,000 Minutes of Peace Appeal. And when we shared this idea in February in Madhuban, Mount Abu, about 30 countries were represented, and they were all keen to participate. And through the next few months, as we were serving, creating the platform to make this appeal happen, by then it was already September, and around 80 countries were participating in this, including all the 60 countries where we had centers. And it was amazing because the world was responding to this in a very big way. And then it was God's magic. Dadi Prakashmani, Dadi Jayanti was supporting this. It was an idea that wasn't completely understood by some people, but the Dadis were always behind us, and especially Dadi Prakashmani. She told us, you go ahead, I'm with you. And that support and that absolute trust that even though we were doing something very new, it was going to be fine, and it was really part of service and not some strange idea that we had created. And that became the largest non-fundraising project for the UN. And it was Dadi who then came to New York to receive the International Peace Messenger Award from the Secretary General of the UN at that time. And so it was Dadi's far-sighted vision that made her see what was the possibility in this very simple idea that we had shared with her in February. One last story that I really have to share, a very personal one again. In 2004, we had the opening of Diamond House in London, and we thought Dadi was really unwell, but she wanted to come and she was ready to come, so she came in September. We'd made a very light program for her, just something every day. But as soon as she's arrived, she wants to know the program. Something ignited her fire within, her passion. And she was conducting morning class, she was meeting groups through the day, and also doing public events. And one morning, after the morning class, she invited an international group of sisters to have breakfast with her. And it was people from the USA, people from London, a few others around. And Dadi spoke to us all in English for 30 minutes at least, maybe longer. And she didn't need any translation. And this was, I think, her last tour abroad in 2004, September. But it was a beautiful time to see Dadi so well, Dadi not needing an interpreter. Dadi told me I was out of a job, and I was very happy to be out of that job of translator. And Dadi was communicating with such love, lightness and laughter with all of us. So that's the memory that I hold in my mind in a very beautiful way. Thank you.